hear me. All right, and I'll call this regular meeting of the Board of Education order at 7:12 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Ms. Mohammed? Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now take a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. At the start of each meeting, it bears reminding that the mission of the Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in a first-class education for a changing world. And before we go any further, I'd like to say thank you to Connor Childers. He's working behind the scene to produce the board's broadcast via Zoom, YouTube, live stream, and Comcast Channel 20. He was also featured in the Chamber of Commerce, Rockford Chamber of Commerce vision, as was Mrs. Detman. So they each had a page, and it's always great when our leaders and our people who work with us and for us are recognized. So yay for you guys, thank you. Tonight, we have time set aside for the public hearing on the safe return to in-person instruction and use of ARP ESSER funds. Those are the American Rescue Plan and the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. So, we don't have anybody who's speaking on that issue because this is not on that issue. So we will move right on. We are at the petition and communication portion of our meeting where we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right of citizens to petition their government as well as provides freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to the comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting you comply with the guidances that are posted. Each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It is not appropriate to address individual members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. If you look to your left, you'll see 2 digital clocks. One shows the total time allotted to public comment, and one shows the total time for each speaker. We thank you for your interest and for your cooperation with our guidelines. We do only have 1 speaker, so I didn't read about what to do and where to sit and all that. I think that's legal. We have 1 speaker this evening, and that is Michael O'Neill, and I would like to welcome you to the podium, please.
You hear me so far? Yes. All right.
They can't hear you across the ear.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's better, huh? All right. So my name is Michael O'Neill. I was born here. My mother died when I was young, so I was raised in Iowa. I moved back here when I was 18. So I've been a Rockford resident for a while, except when I graduated from the University of Illinois, and I moved to Wisconsin 20 years or so, raised a family. I just moved back here about 5 years ago. So this is the first time in front of this board, first time in front of a board at all, I think. There's 2 issues I want to address, and I haven't researched this as far as what you're doing in the Rockford public school system, but the 2 issues that I want to address is 1, critical race theory, and number 2, is a recent legislation that went through the Illinois legislature concerning sex education to kids, okay, as early as 5 years old, okay? That really appalls me that that would happen. To me, that's very wrong. And I don't know if I'm talking to deaf ears here, but I felt like I should at least address somebody in the community, and I believe that there's a huge amount of people, if they knew what was going on, would be standing here as well. But most people don't. As you can see, they're pretty vacant. Both of these issues are something that needs to be addressed one way or another. I'll start with critical race theory, and I don't have much time. I believe that you should teach history as it is, good, bad, and ugly, okay? There's been some ugly things that happen in our country. But I've been around for a while, and I've seen all this, what you call racism. I've seen this prejudice toward people, toward prejudice of people of color. It's wrong. I never liked it. But critical race theory does not solve it. What I see when I get, and I have a lot of people of color that are friends, we're coming out of that. We're turning a corner, and critical race theory brings us right back into it. It institutionalizes racism, and that is not what we want, okay, in this community or in our school. And I just think you should think about that. If it's not, even if it's not called critical race theory, if it has the aspect of it, and besides that, it's coming, quite frankly, if you research it, it's coming out of Marxism, okay? That's something that's well known. I think my time is up, but those are the 2 points.
You want to come back and talk to us about the sex ed piece next time?
I can. You're going to invite me back?
I'm inviting you back.
All right. Anyway, I hope that you at least, will think about what I said on these two issues. There's not much time to go into it in depth, but I think all of you know what I'm talking about. On both of these issues, every one of you know what's going on.
Thank you.
I think you should.
And you do know that we all have email addresses. Feel free to send us a note if you want to go into more depth.
Okay.
And the time
appreciate
allows
that.
as well.
Anyway.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. We're now on to board member comments. Are there any board member comments? Ms. Pearson.
Yes, I want to say congratulations to all of the 2021 graduates. I know that it was a very challenging year, but you made it. So congratulations to you and all those that played a part in making that happen. I want to give a special thanks to Mike Phillips and Jason Bartel for the navigation and assistance with some behind the scenes things needed. So I wanted to publicly thank you for that. I would like to add that being a new board member, there were some details that perhaps in the area of communication with directives could have been better. I understand that this was a unique year and things were done a little different, but commencement services are pretty standard, and it would have just been a little helpful to have some better directives in terms of participation and any expectations. So that would have been very helpful. In regards to Juneteenth, thank you, Mr. Earl Dotson Jr., and the communications showed up in a very big way, and it was a huge success. And thanks to all of you who came out to support. It was just absolutely phenomenal to, come together at a time such as Juneteenth and be able to share with the community about RPS 205. And we want to bridge that gap in terms of communication with our community, and that was a good start. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no other lights, I'm going to say thank you to you and to Ms. Muhammad for representing us at Juneteenth. It was great to have the school system there, so thank you. And I know that it was probably a rough start from that perspective too, not having been in that situation, but thank you, thank you. All right, moving on.
I am so sorry, Jude.
What?
If I can add.
Sure.
Miss Lanisha Sterling. I definitely don't want to forget her. Oh my goodness. She did an awesome job organizing and setting up, and it was perfect. And I cannot think, it was like she heard of a need and took off with it and making everything so perfect and organized. So thank you, Mrs. Sterling.
No problem. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'm going to immediately defer to Mrs. Detman to share what I believe will be the draft form. We've been talking about our system-wide framework for improvement for well over a year now, and this is going to be an opportunity for the board to take a look at what I think is going to be a much stronger draft, and we're looking forward to moving into implementation as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Jarrett. You have 2 supporting documents in your packet in addition to a copy of these slides. The first supporting document is a summary of the scorecard changes that were presented to you at the June 8th board meeting. The second is a large, roughly 100-page draft of the handbook of pulling all of this work together into one place. I say draft because it is very draft. We are continuing to make updates to that nearly daily as we kind of round the corner of this fiscal year. My goal tonight is to provide you a year in review. What have we done to support the CEO-centric goal of developing the system performance framework? As a reminder, we began with this familiar visual, which is having inconsistent quality of schools depending on your geographic location in our city. And we asked ourselves as a rally cry, what are we going to do about this? And we narrowed our focus to 2 key areas: advancing our equity imperative as a district and raising student achievement toward the end goal of having high-quality schools across our city, no matter your neighborhood. Our next question for our rally cry team was, how are we going to do it? And that led us to the development of the system-wide framework, which, if you'll recall, has 4 key components that are interlocking circles showing the dependency of one component on another to create an overall system for accountability. I'll walk through each of these 4 components with a review on our progress to date. First, continuous improvement. What did we do? We made 2, and this is where you can refer to the supporting handout in your packet. We made changes for 2 reasons to the scorecard. The first was because of the pandemic, which created instability in our metrics and even our assessments in general. So we had to adjust based on that. Secondly, we took a look at the scorecard and how it fits within the system as a whole and ensured tight alignment for district goals and increase of attention on survey results, not just participation. And you can see the summary of those changes in your packet. The standards. What did we do? We created this from scratch. We looked around the country to learn lessons from other performance frameworks, and we applied those lessons within our local context. We identified first 3 areas of commitment that we will relentlessly pursue for students and their families. Those fall into 3 buckets based on what we learned from the Wallace Foundation Research Meta-Study of Effective Principles. First, relationships. Our commitment is to listen to our students, families, and staff, and that we believe their partnership is critical to our improvement. For instruction, we prioritize active learning, safety, and relationships to help students grow. And strategic decisions. We use disaggregated data to build equitable learning environments that serve all students well. From there, we created 2 things: standards of practice. Again, in review, the standards of practice are those things that schools will pursue relentlessly in service to students and families. We also developed and are developing, very present tense, standards of service. These are those items that our central office departments will pursue relentlessly in support of schools. These are now fully drafted. You can see the language for each full set in the handbook that's attached to your packet. How did we do this? We committed to a disciplined system of listening, gathering data, identifying themes and key insights, learning from them to generate actions, asking questions in the form of, how might we? The next component is quality. We began with an understanding only of the quality peer review. What did we do? We learned and we committed from the beginning that quality could not stand alone, and it needs to be meaningfully attached to the other components of the system if we want to be successful. Where we're at right now is that we're asking this question: how do we leverage other parts of the framework to reach the district goals? If quality cannot stand alone, where does it fit in with the other components of the framework? And that has led us to doing some backwards design and starting with the large-scale event of the QPR in mind. What would it look like for us to focus on instruction, relationships, and strategic decision-making in those events? What we learned from our principals is that a once every 3 years event is simply not enough. And that led us to the idea of cycles of inquiry. Cycles of inquiry are proposed to happen 3 times annually, and they are meant to make school improvement a team sport. School leadership, school supervision, and other district leadership coming together to ask questions about what's really happening in schools at a regular cadence. This is not yet fully developed. As we welcome our new chief of schools on board with cabinet, this component will be developed in partnership with principals. Accountability. Accountability centers around the question, what happens if we have downward movement? What did we do? We identified 2 key components now to getting at a summative designation for schools. First, the school scorecard, which you've had multiple presentations on, and the standards of practice, which we've also reviewed multiple times. Those 2 pieces together equal a school summative designation. That summative designation, we're proposing a 50-50 weighting. That decision has not yet been made. Those 2 scores together put schools into a 3, 4, or 5-year track, from most intensive supports to universal supports. Beyond that, what we've heard loud and clear from our schools through our intentional listening is that mutual accountability is critical for our success. And so we've created a system of standards of service and an opportunity for schools to sort of score central office departments on their execution of those standards of service and integrate that into our central office evaluations so that accountability becomes real, not just for school principals, but for our system as a whole. So our system-wide framework, again, has the 3 key components that yield accountability for our system. We've come a really long way this year, but we have a long way to go. As we continue our work, and I'll preview that work here in just a moment, we're also ensuring that we're leveraging each part of the system to ensure equity throughout our system. On our quality side, we're really focused on common goals and listening to all voices to sort of test the soil, the environment in each school with a focus on relationships. On the standards side, we're really ensuring that our central office is listening to building leaders so that we can provide the supports that schools need to reach their common goals. So our rally cry question becomes then, now what are we going to do? What are the next steps? What is the year in preview? First, in collaboration with our communications department, is to do a full race process to plan for and launch our communications for the 2021-22 school year. We need to test our data collection tools in schools. That is currently scheduled for September. We need to expand our listening systems. I've worked with Ms. Mohammed, and we've developed a draft protocol to bring parent focus groups together. We are in the phase of scheduling those now. We need to develop the quality component in partnership with the chief of schools. We need to design supporting data system infrastructure for district level, school level, and classroom level dashboards. We need to design supporting human resources infrastructure to help all employees find their role in contributing to the district's overall success, aligned to our goals and standards. And we need to develop the accountability infrastructure under the board's direction. So Dr. Jarrett posed multiple questions to the board to help frame that work about 2 months ago. And we still have a ways to go under kind of defining the action at the end of our 3, 4, and 5-year cycles. Those are our primary areas of focus as we move forward. You can see there's still a lot to do. We've developed the overall framework. We've moved from concept into reality. We're preparing ourselves to begin living within this framework and ensure that this is our sole focus as an entire system. In order to be successful, now we need to keep deepening our understanding of it and what it will take to be successful through data, human resources, and ultimately finalizing our answers to all of those questions that Dr. Jarrett posed. Okay. I'll take any questions.
Questions? Mike?
Yeah, this is a bit more of a comment, but for those of you that this is new, let me point out there's 2 items in there about data. Yay, nerds. Come on, let's hear it for us nerds. And the fact is that this is going to be based on data, that we know we have to get tools to apply, and just as a way of education, it takes the right tools and processes to get the data and then to analyze the data and give visualization essentially of the results. So that's what we should expect and what the public should expect to see. Processes will support it, and then the visualization and the presentation will be there that clearly shows the relationships that Mrs. Detman is talking about. And then it said in there also design supporting data system infrastructure, so on and so forth. Let me make one comment is that now for a number of years, we have been talking about this infrastructure, so it's not like we have to go out and get it from scratch. We have a great many things in place. The Decision Ed, which we bought now, is that 2 years ago,
4.
maybe 3. Time flies when you're having fun. But it's been a while, so my point is that a lot of this structure is in place, and now we have to do some things with it to make sure that what we're trying to measure goes through in a way, and this was gonna be my point. I've done this for probably 30 years. I've mostly been a data person. That's what in real life, that's what I do. And one of the things that I'll say is most of the issues on results is when the processes don't work. And I really give high marks to where we're headed on this. And I think it's one of the things that both the public and we should have our eye on is how, what's the veracity of the data that we're getting through. And I'm glad to see it being highlighted. So I really, for those of you that this sounds like, corporate mishmash, which I could kind of understand, I really would say keep your eye out for what the district does on how it collects data and how it makes that data into analysis that you should be able to understand. And that's really our goal. I mean, we have the right goals, but that would be a way of, I think, presenting it. So I'm really happy to see all those as a part of this.
Thank you.
I don't see any other lights. I would like to just make the comment, I mean, slide 33, develop a communications plan and launch for the 2021-22 school year. We've had some really great initiatives in this district, but we've had implementation issues.
Yeah.
And part of that is communication. So I, as a board member, I'm hoping to see a really good plan so that part of part of being used is because people understand what it is, what they're using, and I think that's a real challenge with the depth of work that's done. And when you're talking about a 100-page handbook and you're talking about a whole new framework, I think that's a real challenge, and it will be critical to the success. So I look forward to that. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you. I want to make sure we got through this part of the discussion. There was one other issue I did want to raise. Has everyone had a chance to ask questions or make comments? I did just want to refer back to an email I sent out. I do have Dr. Saltis and Ms. Nelson here, and I'm available. But I did want to just raise the issue that I sent an email to the board talking about the possibility of potentially bringing forward assistant principal positions at the early childhood level. and wanted to just make sure before those positions begin to come forward that I want you to know I'm available, or I can make Ms. Nelson or Dr. Saltis available to ask any questions. The big controversy behind this would be making an investment in Fund 10 state or locally funded dollars to support a program that is essentially largely supposed to be funded by state dollars. And because of that, I wanted to be very explicit with the board that I was making that ask. Historically, I have not supported this for that reason. There are really three reasons I outlined in the email. One is I do think that having an assistant principal at the elementary level has had a huge impact on succession planning and strengthening the principalship. Secondly, it really allows to create complete core functions of the principalship, including up to 70 staff evaluations that are required. These are very large, complex buildings to run. When a principal is absent, we're often having a lead teacher or someone having to step into that role. And so I do think that the payoff in K-12 education would come with early investment in kindergarten readiness and early literacy. So that is the retention and attraction of high quality principals and succession planning, the ability to complete core functions of the position, including teacher evaluations fully and completely without getting pulled into other data with support, and my belief that strong early childhood outcomes will impact kindergarten readiness, which can lead to ultimately the third grade literacy issues and numeracy issues that we're continuing to struggle with the district. I completely understand the other side of this argument is this is going to be about, depending on where we bring people in at, about a $400,000 a year investment of district dollars. And so I wanted to be very transparent and explicit with that. We are not bringing anything to the board tonight, but I wanted to make myself available and our team available to answer any questions before we bring any of those positions forward. I want to make sure I have a clear direction from the board in general before we bring specific individuals forward.
Seeing no other lights, can you talk about how this was in the budget that we passed earlier
This would have to be a budget addition, and based on our initial budget assumptions, this was not something I supported, but we do have some better than expected revenues projected. I can turn over to Mrs. Yar specifically. I worked with Mrs. Yar from Finance as well as Mr. Zedeker from Human Resources before even considering the request.
Yeah, so the next stage of our budget, we're passing the budget in September. So we'll be bringing forward new requests. So we went through the new requests yesterday, largely, and then we'll be bringing them forward in a committee of the whole meeting. So that'll be part of the request.
So there has been discussion at the state level about increasing early childhood funding. Do we see that as a possibility or a probability? And if there was an increase in early childhood funding, could we use that for these positions?
Yes, I do think it is. It continues to be a topic at the state level. We do feel like we have the funding available to cover this position for the next 2 to 3 years, but there are no guarantees with state funding. But if increased state funding were to become available specifically to early childhood, I believe this would be one of our top priorities to make this investment.
Yeah, 2 questions. Number one, what is the relationship of the funding to the current status that I believe most of early childhood is done by grants, and I assume that the discussion, so what Mr. Rollins said, I'm kind of adding on to that is what events or what kind of confidence level do we have that it might go from grant to what I'll call more stable funding for the early childhood?
Mr. Connor, that is an excellent question, building on Mr. Rollins' equally excellent question, and I have a very poor answer. Living in the state of Illinois, I am confident that we do have a combination of federal and increased evidence-based funding that we could use to make this investment. I think we should make this investment in order to ensure that we have stability in this very important work that we're doing. But I could not begin to predict that the state will increase specific funds as to early childhood. They did not do so in this budget cycle, but I certainly will make it a priority to advocate for such stable funding.
Yeah, my second is actually a comment, and that, again, for those of you that have not followed this, I bet it's at least 5 years ago now that we had a professor from the University of Wisconsin come down here and talk to us. And one of the things she said was that the time period to really improve results for all children is 0 to 5. So, I mean, we spend all our time talking about all the other parts, and they are absolutely critical, but early childhood is one of the defining factors, if I understood correctly, on all the statistics and the impact of negatively impacting our students. So if students come ill-prepared, it's really because we have not done a good enough job as a community. So that means all of you, everybody listening, this is not a pass it along to other people. This is all of us. We have to understand early childhood is probably one of the most important things if we really want to improve outcomes for all kids and to reduce things like crime and all kinds of problems. Early childhood has to be addressed. So again, those of you that think this is just some budget item we're talking about, this is probably one of the most important things we'll ever do. And so I would say this is one thing, if you're not writing to your state representatives and senators, there are very few things that I would personally say go out of your way to do. This would be one to say you have to help us on this one. So what I'll say is we have an opportunity and we have to take this opportunity.
We need to get her to go down and talk to the people in Springfield, maybe. She made such an impact, right? So having had an opportunity to have a discussion, my understanding is that there will be, unless there's any other negative or continuing conversation that we need to have, that administration will be looking to hire those positions, and you can vote yes or no on them, and that will be how you'll weigh in on the new position. So that search will commence. Are we okay? We're now at the performance monitoring, and thank you for being here as well, Ms. Saltis, and who else was here? Ms. Nelson. I didn't see Kim. Where? Oh, you know what? There's a pole right between you guys. All right. Thank you. We're at the Performance Monitoring Committee items, and we actually have an open motion on the floor for the approval of Board Policy 2.172, Board of Education Use of Consultants. Are there any questions? It's already on the floor, so seeing no lights and no questions, we can call the roll, please.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you. And I know there was a lot of conversation about getting that done by the 22nd, and it is done. So thank you for the work of those who put the time in. Our second item is Board Policy 4.60, Operational Services, Purchases, and Contracts. May I have a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions about this policy? Seeing none, I'll ask the coordinator to call the roll.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. We're now on to the consent portion of our meeting, which includes items previewed by the board committee chairs during the committee of the whole meeting. Those items include payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders for fiscal year 21, purchase orders for fiscal year 22 issued from 4/28/2021 through 6/11/2021. Monthly cash and investment report, May 2021. Financial results, May 2021. The construction pay request log, the RPS managed work change order logs, Star Insurance Company workers' compensation stop loss, the continuous public official bond and payment of premium, IFB 2141 Fairview early childhood roof replacement, the bid for the HVAC and water treatment chemicals and services, the bid for the snow removal, bid for Haskell School Security Vestibule Addition, the bid for the kitchen equipment, which was a rebid, the bid for the cleaning and sanitation services for student Chromebooks and iPads. The consent items coming through the governance committee that we will also be voting on are as follows: the meeting minutes from 6/8/21, the airfare, travel airfare for Ms. Detman and Mr. Wolf, contract purchase order for fiscal year 21, the contract purchase order for fiscal year 22, the 2021-2022 Illinois Association of School Board annual dues, and the Freedom of Information log. Do I have a second? Do I have a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Rollins?
Well, not pulled, but you mentioned something that I'm not seeing on the agenda. I think it might be 8B, because on my agenda it goes from 8A to 8C.
Oh, that's the travel and airfare?
Mr. Rollins, apparently we're having issues with board docs today because items appear and then they disappear. So it was on the original agenda. So we don't know. I need to call and find out.
This wouldn't happen with paper.
Right, it's on mine.
Yeah.
Do I need?
Nothing would happen, though, if it was on paper, though, I might say. So, yeah.
It is on the published agenda that was published well in advance of this meeting, and that has not been revised. And so I think you can move forward with the airfare because it was on the published agenda. I just don't know what happened to it on board docs. It's odd.
Well, we're just not used to seeing airfare because nobody's been going anywhere for 2 years.
And to clarify, it's one person, one of our private school partners, leveraging their Title I dollars to attend a conference in Nevada. So that's the airfare.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I think you and Travis signed off on it. That's what I'm remembering is
Yes,
your signature
correct.
on the side.
Correct.
My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the correction.
No.
So for anybody who didn't hear, I'm going to have, Mr. Connor, just a second, I'm going to have Ms. Detman repeat the airfare, what it is for, because I misspoke.
The airfare is for one individual from one of our private schools to attend an educational conference in Nevada.
Thank you.
They're using their Title I dollars to do so, so that flows to the district.
My apologies. Mr. Connor, did you have a question?
Nope, I want to pull 7K.
7K? Any others? Okay, seeing no lights, we will vote on the items with the exception of 7K. Please call the roll.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. I take a motion and a second for the Fairview Early Childhood Roof Replacement.
So moved. Oh, second.
Ooh. Yay. Is there discussion on that?
Yeah, I pulled this for a very simple reason. This is going to cost over $714,000. And so often, one of the things we've heard over time is that we're putting money into buildings and not kids. So I want to take this opportunity to say that that is probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I've been waiting like 8 years to say this, is we're coming up where we're planning another 10-year facility plan. And let's just think back 10 minutes ago. What did I say? One of the most important things we're doing is early childhood. And it costs over $700,000. And we're not making that up. Somebody's not poking holes and we're not playing ice skating on the roof at Fairview. So if it's important that we need early childhood and the roof is falling apart, we got to pay for it. So that is true of virtually every building in the district. And we've already gone through 10-year plan. And now we're going to be coming back in probably a year or so, give or take, to start a new one. And what I want you all to think about is how important it is to have buildings that support the educational goals of this district. And I'm pointing this one out because this would have passed by like this, and none of you all would have thought anything of it. But I'm pointing it out because to give you an idea of what one building's roof cost, and it's not a really big building if you know Fairview, the point is we're desperate for it, and it's $700,000 just for that roof. So my point to you is this, to be aware as the public that the buildings and the grounds and the things that we've got really make a difference to the education. And so I wanted to pull this to really make that point.
It's almost twice as much as those assistant principals. Seeing no other lights on, I would ask the following question. Is the building in otherwise, is there a lot of other deferred maintenance needed on that building? And I asked you this question knowing that there's a possibility that the state is going to be forthcoming with support for capital. So if we put in $750,000 on this building, is it one of the buildings that we'd want to replace?
Actually, Fairview is in very good shape. Last summer, we did interior work, painting and flooring. We also did some parking lot work at Fairview last year. So that building is in decent shape. To your question, Ms. McCulloch, yes, there is other deferred maintenance items at Fairview, and that school will also be part of our ESSER 2 and ARP ESSER HVAC upgrade review. So we'll be looking at investing other dollars at that school also.
All right, seeing no other lights on, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on 7K.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. We're now at the closed session consent agenda, including the following. The appointment of Richard Durso as a 10-month dean at Lewis Lemon Elementary School. Appointment of Kyle Hines as 10-month dean at Risa Middle School. The appointment of Erica Schwank at, is it Schwanky or Schwank? With an E, Schwanky, thank you, as a 10-month assistant principal at Washington Elementary School. The appointment of Zachary Fraser as a 10-month assistant principal at Riverdale Elementary School. The appointment of Paula Randall as 11-month principal at Whitehead Elementary School. The appointment of Julio Lopez as a 12-month principal at Barber Two-Way Language Academy. Appointment of Morgan Gallagher as a 12-month chief of schools. The HR organizational report and addendum. And unless otherwise modified, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. GDM 2057-21, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the entire 2021-2022 school year. GDM 4383-21, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the entire 2021 and 2021 through 2022 school year. GDM 4386-21, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the entire 2021-2022 school year. The closed session EIAs, GDM 1072-21, GDM 8232-21, and GDM 8233-21. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any closed session consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. Pearson.
10B and C, 11A, B, and C.
And would you like me to take those all separately?
You can gather, they can be grouped.
As a group, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to, is there any others? Seeing no lights, I'm going to ask you to please call the roll on the approval of 10A GDM 2057. Oh, and 9A through H. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. I will take a motion then in a second for 10B and C and 11A through A, B, and C.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. No discussion, so I'll ask the coordinator to call the roll, please.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. We're on to other business, new business agenda recommendations, and I had a couple items on here. Dr. Jared has already brought forward the early childhood assistant principals, so we can move past that. There has been a request for business cards for board members, and I wanted to have a conversation with the board about that. We haven't done those in many years. Our terms are for less than 2 years. There are some aspects to the cards that we could talk about if there's consensus among members that we would like to provide cards to anyone who requests them. What does that mean?
Oh, I'm just so excited to potentially have a business card. I just
Look like the Grinch there. No, I'm sorry. Mr. Rollins.
I was just going to say, if we do it for anyone who requests, I'm fine with that, but just don't do it automatically. I mean, I got a stack of business cards. I didn't ask for them when I first got on the board. I don't think I used them once, so they just sat on my shelf.
Okay. Legal and I had a conversation. There are some concerns about what can be put on the card, or what should be put on the card, and so I'd like to run that by you. I know that we would like to, because we each have a sub-district, but we really represent the entire district. The recommendation is that there is no sub-district written on the card. Also, if a card is requested, that there would be a term on there, so that, you know, if somebody finds your card and you're no longer a board member and they pull it out, this way they would know that you are your term was up in 2023, because we're all up in 2023. Also, that we would have a very limited number, just because we have short period, and that we'd be happy to order more as needed, so that we're not like Tim in line in our garbage cans with them, or that you still have them is amazing.
I think they're still sitting on the shelf.
I will fully confess, I've worked for a couple companies since, and that's the only card I ever pass out. I've been to a lot of conferences for something else and said, here, it's got my phone number on it.
And it's got your.
So I use them all the time.
Great. And so you might be requesting them then, as soon as we have yes, Ms. Pearson.
So just for clarity and point of information, so the sub-district, while we represent as a whole District 205, the sub-district that we serve identify is a part of identification of the area that we represent. So I'm not sure I understand why you would separate the sub-district from the person that represents that particular sub-district. Because at the end of the day, the people chose that representative for that district, and it's a part of their identity as a school board member.
So each of you represent all of the sub-districts, and I understand the voting on how individual board members are elected. They're voted through sub-districts, but once you're on the board, you represent the entire school district. And I think it limits, both from a perception aspect of folks who might not realize that each and every one of you represent the entire school district. And so the other thing that you want to be careful about is we don't ever want to have a perception that we're electioneering. So as you enter into another election period and passing out the cards, we're prohibited from doing anything that would be viewed as electioneering. So that's where that recommendation came from.
Thank you. So the other information that is made available, for example, the mapping, so why don't we have that just listed of the board members as opposed to the representatives for those specific sub-districts?
Right. I don't know where that or how that ever was developed, other than when we have it when we redistrict, those maps are prepared for redistricting. So new maps will be generated when we have to do the redistricting that goes with the annual census. So that is up and coming. I know Mike is already working on that. So Mr. Phillips is already working on identifying a demographer and then doing the redistricting. So that's where those maps come from.
Thank you. And I definitely understand your point. It's just really important that it is already a disconnect between our district and our community and the representation that we have on the board. So that is why I'm expressing my concern as to it being identified. Like, for an example, the information that we passed out at Juneteenth, people were excited to know who represented their district, their sub-district. And so that information, again, I can't stress enough how important it is to include that. Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on. I'm going to comment on this, and that would be even before becoming an officer. Or I heard from people from all sub-districts because, and I'd like to kind of poll the rest of the board members. Do you not get calls from people in other sub-districts? Because nobody ever calls me and says, you're my representative, so I want you to do this for me. I've gotten them from A, and they're with questions and concerns, and it doesn't matter to me. They're part of our district, and I bring those forward. So you know, disaggregating by sub-district or trying to do so, I just really see all of us as being responsible and being responsible for taking calls and concerns from anyone throughout the entire community or any other sub-district.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jude. My point is, I would think that if you received a call from a constituent of Subdistrict A, that you would extend that courtesy to include me in what is going on in the district that I represent. Just because we're team members, and it's just good information to have that and be aware of issues in the sub-district that I represent. So I couldn't agree more that, because I've gotten calls from other sub-districts as well, but I've made a point to reach out to that representative for that sub-district just for the sake of communication and awareness of constituents' concern. That's all.
I wonder if that makes a difference about what the concern is. I'd like to hear from other board members. This isn't, just us, because I've never done that, to be frank. I would just take the concern to the appropriate person, usually the superintendent, and lay it there. I haven't. So how about the rest of you when you've gotten calls from other sub-districts? Do you feel, if I get a call from your sub-district, Mike, would you want me to call you and tell you that somebody called?
I totally understand Ms. Pearson's point, which is, I think, good. I have to agree that there's nothing wrong with identifying your sub-district so the folks that live there can know that part. I think that, I totally understand that. The formality of how you let somebody know, and if you let them know, I think that's something we can discuss. I'm actually open to that as an idea. I will just say that when I get calls, the first thing I say is, now just so you know, you could call any school board member. You don't have to call me because I'm, in your sub-district F. So, but I totally understand that having an identification, and especially where we probably haven't had as much connection as we really should, I totally understand that point.
And people don't always give you their address or even know their sub-district. So it's not even a question I would ask. Let's go across the board, because I think we should be consistent in what we do if there's a request. David?
I have had a few calls in the 5 years I've been on the board from folks outside of my sub-district, and I guess I can think of getting a rash of them where they're calling in support of a particular issue. I can remember when we were discussing outsourcing transportation, getting a lot of calls from other sub-districts. Generally, though, when someone has had an issue that was more personal and they're outside of my district, the issue has been so specific that it would be hard to believe that it is something that affects a whole sub-district. Somebody is, questioning transportation because they're across the street from that 1.5 mile cutoff, for instance. That's just a simple solution of having them contact transportation and say, whatever. So I will just pass their concern on to the superintendent and to transportation. I cannot recall a single instance where the call was of such a nature that it affected somebody outside the walls of their house. But I can also understand just saying to another board member, I just had somebody from your district with this particular issue. It wouldn't be violating any quorum issues to copy that other board member on the communications to the superintendent and whatever other party. So I guess if other board members feel like that would be useful information, I'm certainly happy to do it.
June?
We were going to.
Oh, you already said you wanted us to. I apologize. Go ahead.
Let me just add this last note, because I frequently hear, and I can definitely appreciate the work of each board member and the many years that they serve. And I can empathize and appreciate that. I would like to add that change, it's really okay to change. and do something new and do something different. I think that that sends a message to our community, and we should be open to that. And this is a minor subject matter, no doubt, but I just want to address that. And as the board evolve and things change and new things are implemented, that it's really okay to embrace something different other than what the standard that we've done in the usual and the comfort place. And because if community members don't know you, that is another strategy and an opportunity for them to get to know you on a personal note. Thank you.
That's a good point. June?
I've not had occasion of knowing what sub-district someone is from when they contact me, and it's not something that I ask because it doesn't occur to me that it matters. So I was always under the impression that we speak with one voice and that we represent the entire district. So, but I'm open to sharing, you know, if I know the sub-district, with sharing what information I receive.
Okay. Tim?
If we're talking about business cards, I don't need any, and I don't care what other people put on their business cards. And I think we've just spent more time on this.
No, we're done with business cards. Do you think that if somebody calls, I would like us to have a consistent process on this. Sorry, because I don't want to offend someone because I didn't call them, if we've all decided that that's something we should do.
I don't care. I just don't. I abstain.
All right. I didn't have clear direction on that. So, what do you want on your business cards? Just name and email and phone number? And you can choose which email and which phone number you put on there, right? All right. Does anybody else have anything to bring to the board? I don't have any board member action steps, any takeaways other than this last piece of information that I can think of. Did I miss anything? All right. If there's no further comments or agenda recommendations, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good night.